This story contains themes of isolation, unexplained phenomena, and psychological tension that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. The static had been there for 3 days. A low, persistent hiss that felt less like a technical glitch and more like the sound of the world holding its breath. For Sarah Jenkins, a senior communications analyst at the National Science Foundation's Remote Operations Division, static was an anomaly. Not an impossibility, but certainly a rarity, especially from a station like Outpost 73, codenamed Polaris. Polaris was supposed to be a shining beacon of human resilience, a state-of-the-art facility dug deep into the ice of West Antarctica, housing a team of 6 brilliant minds. Now it was just a dead zone. Her office, a meticulously organized cube overflowing with monitors displaying intricate signal patterns and satellite trajectories, usually felt like the nerve center of the world. Today it felt like a tomb. The air was thick with unspoken dread. Sarah had spent the last 72 hours glued to her console, eyes burning, fingers flying across keyboards, trying every protocol, every emergency override, every backdoor she knew. Nothing. Not a whisper from Dr. Michael Vance, the lead climatologist, not a crackle from Dr. Jessica Riley, the astrophysicist, not even the usual dry wit from Chris Miller, the station's engineer. Just that godforsaken static. Her supervisor, David Chan, a man whose calm demeanor usually bordered on unnerving, was pacing a worn path in front of her desk, his face a roadmap of anxiety. "Anything, Sarah? Anything at all?" His voice was low, strained. She shook her head, the movement tight and weary. "Still nothing, David. The automated systems are offline. No telemetry, no environmental data, no internal comms. Satellite imagery shows no external damage, no unusual ice formations, no signs of a storm. It's like they just vanished inside the station." David rubbed a hand over his tired eyes. "A complete blackout? That's impossible. Polaris is designed to withstand anything short of a direct asteroid impact. They have redundant power systems, an independent comms array, deep cycle batteries that could power a small town for a year. Even if the primary systems failed, the emergency beacon should be active." "It's not," Sarah confirmed, her voice flat. "I've pinged it 100 times on every frequency." Silence. The silence from Antarctica was a chilling, absolute thing. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the absence of life. 6 people, isolated by hundreds of miles of frozen desolation, cut off from the entire world. The implications were a cold knot in Sarah's stomach. They had sent out the official alerts. Military assets were being mobilized, though everyone knew what a search and rescue operation in that part of Antarctica entailed: weeks, maybe months of planning and execution, and even then, success wasn't guaranteed. Especially not when the target was a station that had simply gone dark. Sarah leaned back, trying to clear her head. The standard operating procedure for a communication failure was always the same: exhaust all technical avenues, then escalate. She had exhausted them, but there was one last, desperate long shot she hadn't tried. The legacy system. Years ago, before the cutting-edge digital networks, before the encrypted fiber optics, there was an old analog system. A clunky, dial-up relic kept alive mostly for historical data retrieval, and as a theoretical, absolute last resort backup. It was slow, unreliable, and notoriously difficult to interface with modern tech. No one had touched it in years, least of all the Polaris team, who prided themselves on their advanced infrastructure. "David," she began, her voice hesitant, "I'm going to try the legacy server. It's a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, one of the older protocols could have kicked in, or a cached message from before the blackout could be sitting there." David's head snapped up. "The old V-band system? Sarah, that's ancient. It barely runs on our current operating systems." "I know," she said, already pulling up the archaic interface on a secondary monitor. "But it's the only channel I haven't tried to actively scan for outgoing transmissions. It's a slim chance, but what do we have to lose?" He watched her, his expression a mix of skepticism and desperate hope. "Go for it. Anything." The old system groaned to life, a series of grating mechanical noises emanating from the server room down the hall, followed by a painfully slow boot-up sequence on her screen. It felt like trying to start a vintage car with a dead battery. Minutes crawled by, each second amplified by the crushing weight of the unknown. Sarah bypassed the usual login protocols, using an administrator override code she'd memorized years ago for a system audit. The screen flickered, a cascade of green text on a black background, reminiscent of an old sci-fi movie. She navigated through the labyrinthine directories, her fingers flying with practiced speed, even on a system she rarely used. Email archives, data logs. Then she saw it. A folder labeled Voicemail Archive. It was an unexpected discovery. The Polaris team rarely used the antiquated voicemail function, preferring direct digital communication. Why would there be anything there? Her heart hammered against her ribs. She clicked on it, a sense of foreboding settling over her. The folder was empty, or almost empty. At the very bottom, buried beneath layers of obsolete system files, was a single solitary entry. A file named Polaris_outgoing_message 2047 GM03122045.wave. The date stamp was from 3 days ago, mere hours before the static began. "David," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I found something." He was beside her in an instant, peering over her shoulder, his breath hitched. "What is it?" "A voicemail," she said, her voice tight. "From Polaris. Sent just before they went dark." A wave of adrenaline, cold and sharp, coursed through her. This was it. The answer. Or at least the beginning of one. She clicked the file, her finger trembling slightly. A tiny progress bar appeared, inching forward with agonizing slowness. The silence in the office was absolute, broken only by the whirring of hard drives and the frantic beating of her own heart. Then a burst of static, louder and harsher than any she had heard before, ripped through the speakers. Her hands flew to the volume control, turning it down slightly, but the raw, unfiltered noise persisted, a violent tearing sound. Through it, a voice began to emerge. It was distorted, crackling, barely recognizable, but it was unmistakably Dr. Michael Vance, the lead scientist. His voice, usually calm and measured, was now ragged, strained, laced with an edge of terror that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "This is Vance. Outpost 73. Polaris, recording this on the emergency analog loop. If anyone gets this. If anyone is out there." His voice broke, swallowed by another surge of static, like an invisible hand clamping over his mouth. Sarah leaned closer, straining to hear, her entire being focused on the fractured sounds. "We had a breach. Not physical, something else. It came from the ice. From beneath the ice. It's not biological. Not geological. It's intelligent. And it's here. Inside the station." Sarah's blood ran cold. Asterisk intelligent? Inside the station. Asterisk what could possibly be intelligent and come from beneath the Antarctic ice? Her mind raced, dismissing theories as quickly as they formed. A new species? An ancient civilization? No, Vance's voice wasn't just describing a discovery. It was describing a predator. More static, then Vance's voice, now a desperate gasp. "It got Emily, it's imitating her. We can hear it, walking in the vents. Whispering. It knows us. It knows our fears. It's trying to get into our heads. We tried to seal the core lab, but it's already..." A sickening thud echoed through the recording, followed by a choked cry that sounded like Jessica Riley. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. David beside her was rigid, his face pale and etched with horror. "It's not trying to kill us, not directly," Vance continued, his voice a frantic whisper, laced with a horrifying clarity. "It's worse. It wants to understand us, to become us, and it's learning so fast. Took Chris, it's using his voice now. Telling us things only we would know. Trying to break us." The sound of something scraping against metal, a low guttural growl that was utterly inhuman, tore through the speakers. It was followed by a chilling, distorted whisper that seemed to emanate directly from the heart of the static itself, a voice that was both familiar and utterly alien. It sounded like Chris Miller, the station engineer, but twisted, stretched, and filled with a malicious glee. "Dr. Vance, why are you hiding? Don't you want to join us? It's so warm in here." Then a sudden piercing shriek that was abruptly cut off. A final desperate, gasping breath from Vance, followed by a raw, guttural scream that wasn't human. The line went dead. The static returned, but now it was different. It wasn't just the sound of a broken connection. It was the sound of a void, a universe of terrifying emptiness. And then silence. An absolute, deafening silence. Sarah sat frozen, her hand still hovering over the mouse. The air in the office felt impossibly cold, mirroring the ice-locked horror that had just invaded her senses. David was staring at the screen, his mouth agape, his face ashen. "My God!" He finally managed to croak, the words barely escaping his throat. What was that?" Sarah couldn't speak. Her mind was reeling, trying to process the impossible. An intelligent entity from beneath the ice? Imitating voices? Preying on fears? This wasn't a communication failure. This wasn't a scientific anomaly. This was a nightmare ripped straight from the darkest corners of human imagination, and it had just swallowed 6 people whole, thousands of miles away, in the most isolated place on Earth. And now that nightmare had left a voicemail, a chilling, impossible message that defied logic, reason, and every known law of nature. The last voicemail from the Antarctic research team, and it had just opened a door to a terror far colder than the ice itself. The phone slipped from David Miller's trembling fingers, clattering against the polished oak of his desk. His breath hitched, a cold knot tightening in his chest, mirroring the impossible chill that had just seeped into his sterile, climate-controlled office. The voicemail. It wasn't just a message, it was a violation, an auditory assault on everything he understood about the world, about reality, about the very laws of physics. He stared at the phone, as if it were a venomous snake, its innocuous black casing now radiating a silent, terrifying hum. He, David Miller, a man of science, a man who had dedicated his life to logic and empirical evidence, felt a primal fear he hadn't experienced since childhood nightmares. This was worse. This was real. The Polaris team. Gone. Vanished. And yet, that voicemail. His mind replayed the fragmented sounds, the distorted words. A garbled scream not quite human, followed by a frantic, choked whisper from Dr. Emily Chan, the xenolinguist, her voice usually so precise, so calm, now ragged with terror. It's not from here. It's awake." Then a terrifying guttural roar, ending abruptly with a sound like tearing metal and the sickening crunch of ice, before the line went dead. The timestamp on the message? 2 weeks after their last confirmed communication. 2 weeks after they were officially declared lost. David snatched the phone back, his fingers fumbling as he scrolled through the recent calls. No, this wasn't a prank. This wasn't some elaborate hack. The message was routed through the secure NSF satellite network. Encrypted, authenticated. It was real. But how? How could a message arrive from a team that had vanished without a trace? A team whose last known position was thousands of feet beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. For months, the official narrative had been clear. A catastrophic structural collapse, an unprecedented seismic event, or perhaps a rogue, unmapped crevasse. The Polaris Research Outpost, Station Delta 7, had simply ceased to exist. All attempts at contact, all search and rescue missions, had yielded nothing but an endless, desolate expanse of white. The 6 brilliant minds aboard, Dr. Emily Chan, the visionary lead xenolinguist, Dr. Robert Johnson, the stoic lead geologist, Sarah Jenkins, the sharp-witted communications specialist, Mark Thompson, the seasoned mechanical engineer, Lisa Rodriguez, the meticulous biologist, and Captain Ben Carter, the unflappable station chief, were presumed lost, their incredible work swallowed by the unforgiving continent. David, as the primary liaison between the National Science Foundation and the Polaris mission, had been the one to deliver the devastating news to their families. He had looked into the eyes of heartbroken spouses and bewildered children, offering platitudes about their sacrifice, about the pursuit of knowledge. He had believed it. He had needed to believe it. It was a tragedy, yes, but a comprehensible one. The Antarctic was a brutal mistress. It took lives. It didn't send ghost messages. He slammed his fist on the desk, the dull thud echoing in the sudden silence of his office. This voicemail defied everything. It wasn't just a transmission. It was a reopening of a wound he had painstakingly tried to close. And worse, it suggested a truth far more sinister than any natural disaster. His first instinct was to call Jessica, his sharp, no-nonsense junior analyst. Jessica Hayes, with her uncanny ability to sift through mountains of data and her healthy skepticism, was exactly what he needed. He dialed her extension, his mind racing. "Jessica, get down to my office. Now. And bring every single piece of data we have on Station Delta 7. Especially anything related to their communications logs, power fluctuations, and seismic activity reports. Everything, no matter how insignificant it seemed at the time." He could hear the surprise in her voice. "Sir? Is everything all right?" I thought we closed the Delta 7 file last month. It appears, Jessica, David said, his voice strained, that the file just reopened itself, and it's screaming. Minutes later, Jessica burst into his office, a stack of tablets and a thick binder clutched in her arms. Her usually composed features were etched with concern. What's going on, David? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, David replied, pushing his phone across the desk. I think I just heard one. He played the voicemail for her. As the distorted, chilling sounds filled the quiet office, Jessica's eyes widened, her jaw slowly dropping. The color drained from her face as Emily Chen's desperate whisper cut through the static, followed by the primal roar. When the message ended, a heavy silence descended, broken only by the hum of the office air conditioning. Jessica slowly sank into the chair opposite him, her hands still clutching the binders, now trembling slightly. That's impossible. That's a deep space anomaly, not an Antarctic research team. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. Tell me about it, David muttered, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. But it's real. The routing, the encryption, it's all legitimate. It came from Delta 7, 2 weeks after they vanished. But how? Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. Their power core was designed to last a maximum of 72 hours without resupply or solar recharge. They were buried under thousands of feet of ice. There's no way they could have maintained communications, let alone survived. That's what we need to figure out, David said, his gaze fixed on the blank wall, his mind already piecing together the fragments of a terrifying new puzzle. Let's start with their mission. Remind me, Jessica, what exactly was the Polaris team doing down there? Jessica flipped open a tablet, her fingers still shaking slightly as she navigated to the mission brief. The official cover story was deep ice core drilling for paleoclimate research. Standard stuff. But the classified objective, the real reason Station Delta 7 was established, was much more ambitious. David nodded, remembering the hushed conversations, the layers of security surrounding the project. The seismic anomaly, the one Robert Johnson discovered during his initial survey. Precisely, Jessica confirmed, her voice regaining a touch of its usual analytical precision, as if diving into data was a comfort. Dr. Johnson pinpointed a massive, consistent seismic signature emanating from nearly 3 miles beneath the ice sheet, unlike anything ever recorded. It wasn't tectonic, wasn't volcanic. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat but on a geological scale. And Emily Chen's involvement? David pressed, picturing the brilliant, eccentric linguist who saw patterns where others saw chaos. Dr. Chen was brought in because the anomaly wasn't just seismic, Jessica explained, scrolling through the data. It was also emitting extremely low-frequency radio waves. Ultra-low frequency, actually. Too low for natural phenomena. Too complex for simple geological processes. Her hypothesis, which sounds insane now, was that it might be a form of communication. David felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Communication? From what? Jessica looked up, her eyes wide. That was the million-dollar question, David. Her theories ranged from undiscovered subterranean life forms to some kind of ancient, non-terrestrial signal buried deep within the Earth's crust. She called it the Whispering Stone. The Whispering Stone, David repeated, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. They were trying to make contact. They believed they had made contact, Jessica corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. Their last confirmed transmission before the silence contained a series of complex data bursts. Dr. Chan claimed they were responses to their probes. She believed she was on the verge of a breakthrough, translating what she called geological language. David remembered the excitement in Emily's last video conference, her wild eyes gleaming with discovery. He had dismissed it then, attributing it to the isolation and the sheer scale of her ambition. Now he felt a sickening pang of regret. He should have listened closer. And then the silence, David prompted, urging her to continue. Then the silence, Jessica confirmed, her gaze falling to the voicemail David had played. And now this message from the grave. A message that suggests not just contact, but something went terribly, unspeakably wrong. David leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his hands clasped tightly. We need to re-examine everything, Jessica. Every single data point. Every power surge, every seismic tremor, every faint radio burst. Assume nothing was insignificant. assumed the official explanation was wrong, and that Emily Chun was right, that whatever they found, it's still down there. He picked up his phone again, the voicemail icon glowing ominously. He pressed play, listening intently, trying to filter out the static, the fear, the screams, for something he might have missed. The roar came again, guttural, deafening, then Emily's choked whisper. It's not from here. It's awake." But this time, as the message faded, David didn't just hear silence. Buried beneath the static, just before the line went dead, he heard something else. A faint rhythmic clicking sound. A pattern. A code. And it was repeating. It wasn't part of the original message. It was something new, something that had been added or revealed by the sheer terror of the voicemail. His blood ran cold. The voicemail wasn't just a cry for help from a lost team. It was a warning. And the warning was still being sent. The air in his small apartment seemed to thicken, the hum of his computer now a sinister drone. He felt a primal urge to shut down his system, to sever the connection to that icy, distant terror. But the other stronger urge, the one that had always driven him in his work, pulled him back. He had to understand. He had to listen again. Michael's fingers, trembling slightly, moved across his keyboard. He pulled up the audio file, not just the raw recording, but the meticulously processed version he'd been working on for days. He zoomed in segment by segment, running spectral analyses, applying noise reduction algorithms, everything he knew from years of deciphering garbled military comms and faint distress signals. He wasn't just listening for words anymore. He was listening for patterns, for anomalies, for anything that didn't belong in a simple static recording. The omnipresent hiss of static had always been the most frustrating element, obscuring critical details. Now it felt less like interference and more like a deliberate fail. He isolated it, amplified it, pushing the limits of his professional-grade audio software. And then beneath the blanket of white noise, he heard it. Not words, not a scream, but a rhythm. A subtle, almost imperceptible pulse. A low-frequency thrum that seemed to align with the frantic, shallow breaths of Dr. Eris Thorne. But it wasn't a heartbeat. It was too regular, too deep, too vast. Like a slow, immense exhalation and inhalation. A sound that resonated in his chest more than his ears. It was mechanical, yet unnervingly organic. He went back to the whispers. He'd initially dismissed them as artifacts of the degraded signal, stray fragments of other voices, or the violent environmental noise of the Antarctic storm. But now, with the static isolated and that strange rhythmic pulse identified, he focused on them with renewed intensity. He applied a narrow bandpass filter, trying to bring out any coherent sound within that chaotic murmur. And there, buried deep, he started to pick out fragments. Not words, not yet, but something linguistic. A structure. A cadence. A rising and falling inflection that hinted at communication, however alien. As he listened, hours blurring into an endless night, a strange sensation began to creep over him. A dull ache behind his eyes, a pressure building in his chest. It wasn't just the strain of concentration, the glare of the screen. It felt external, like the sound itself was subtly altering his perception, his very being. He rubbed his temples, trying to shake off the growing unease. He was a professional. He couldn't let his imagination run wild. But the feeling persisted, a cold, creeping certainty that he was not just an observer anymore. He was being affected. He played the voicemail from the beginning, then again. And again. He started to notice something impossible. The quality of the static seemed to shift subtly. The rhythmic pulse he'd identified, it wasn't perfectly consistent. There were minute variations, almost like a breath. A slow, deep inhalation and exhalation, each cycle lasting far longer than any human lung could sustain. And the whispers, they seemed to be coalescing. Not into English, not into any language he recognized from his extensive linguistic databases, but into something more present, more defined, as if a form was slowly taking shape from the auditory chaos. Michael's mind, accustomed to the rigid logic of digital forensics, struggled to reconcile what he was experiencing. He remembered his initial analysis. A single looped recording, a finite data packet. But what if it wasn't a loop? What if the loop was merely a container for something dynamic? Something that wasn't static at all? He ran a comparative analysis, pitting the very first playthrough he'd heard days ago against the current one, frame by frame, waveform by waveform. The software blinked. An alert flashed across his screen. Error. Data mismatch. Significant spectral and waveform discrepancies detected. He tried again. Same result. The audio file, though technically the same digital signature, was subtly fundamentally different. The spectral data, the noise floor, the very fabric of the sound, contained minute, almost imperceptible variations that his sophisticated software was flagging as genuine discrepancies, not mere playback artifacts. How could a recorded message change? It defied every principle of digital audio encoding, every law of physics as he knew it. A static file was static. It didn't evolve. It didn't alter itself. Unless the voicemail wasn't just a recording. Unless it was a live feed. But that was impossible. The Antarctic team was gone. The station was presumed lost, buried under ice and snow, or worse. A live feed required a transmitting source, power, and a functioning communications array. A cold dread descended upon Michael, colder than any Antarctic wind. The voicemail wasn't just a historical artifact, a tragic echo from the past. It was a connection. And whatever was on the other end, whatever had consumed the research team, was still broadcasting, still reaching out. The warning, he realized with a sickening lurch, wasn't just in what Dr. Thorne had desperately tried to articulate. It was in the voicemail itself. A parasitic signal, a resonant frequency, a psychological weapon. It wasn't designed to merely inform. It was designed to affect. And Michael, sitting alone in his apartment, had been directly exposed to it for hours, his mind a receptive conduit. He played the message one last time, his heart thumping against his ribs, a frantic drum against the growing pressure in his chest. He focused on the pulse, that rhythmic thrum beneath the static, now clearer, more insistent. And then for a split second the whispers coalesced. Not into words, not into a language, but into a single piercing tone. A frequency that resonated deep within his bones, bypassing his ears entirely. A sound that wasn't heard but felt. His vision blurred. The walls of his apartment seemed to waver, the familiar objects morphing into indistinct shapes. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to leave, to run, to disconnect, to abandon everything. But it wasn't his own thought. It was an imperative, an instruction. The warning wasn't just being sent, it was being given. And it was telling him to forget, to walk away, to sever all ties to this investigation, to the voicemail, to the very concept of the Antarctic team. And for the first time, Michael felt truly, utterly alone, not just in his apartment but in his own mind. The line between his thoughts and the voicemail's influence had just irrevocably blurred. Michael felt a cold sweat prickle on his skin, independent of the air conditioning humming softly in his small living room. He stared at the phone, not at the screen but through it, as if the device itself had become a window into a different, terrifying reality. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sirens from the city streets outside, even the rhythmic thud of his own heart against his ribs. Everything seemed amplified, distorted, filtered through the static and the chilling whispers he'd just heard. He felt a profound sense of disorientation, as if the ground beneath him had shifted, leaving him suspended in an unfamiliar void. He tried to shake it off, to attribute it to exhaustion, to stress, to the sheer absurdity of the situation. It was a voicemail, for crying out loud. A garbled, impossible voicemail. But the rationalizations felt hollow, like whispers against a hurricane. The image of the ice, the frantic breaths, the raw, primal terror in that final sound. It had imprinted itself onto his consciousness, a parasitic entity burrowing into his thoughts. He stood up abruptly, pacing the cramped space of his living room. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The worn carpet felt strange under his feet. The familiar walls seemed to lean in. He needed to talk to someone. Anyone. But who? David, his best friend, would laugh it off, tell him to get some sleep. Jessica, his ex-girlfriend, would suggest therapy, her voice dripping with the familiar, condescending concern that had ultimately driven them apart. His parents, they'd worry themselves sick and tell him to delete the number and forget about it. No, this was something he couldn't share. Not without sounding completely unhinged. The isolation was a physical weight pressing down on him. He felt an irrational urge to check the locks on his apartment door, to peer through the peephole. What was he expecting to see? An Antarctic research team? A spectral figure emerging from the cold? The absurdity of the thought made him scoff, a dry, humorless sound that echoed strangely in the silence. He forced himself to sit back down, phone still clutched in his hand. He scrolled through his contacts mindlessly, his thumb hovering over David's name. He typed out a message. "Hey man, you busy? Got something weird to tell you." Then he deleted it. No, not yet. He needed to understand it first. He needed to find some shred of evidence, some concrete anchor to reality, before he dragged anyone else into his rapidly unraveling perception of it. His gaze fell on his old laptop, sitting on the coffee table, a relic of late-night research and forgotten projects. He opened it, the screen flickering to life, its glow a stark contrast to the growing darkness outside his window. Google. That was the answer. Information. Logic. He typed in Antarctic research team missing. The results were immediate, overwhelming. Dozens of articles, official reports, news stories stretching back years. Missing planes, lost expeditions, scientific outposts succumbing to blizzards. It was a harsh, unforgiving continent. He refined his search. Antarctic research team lost 2023. Nothing specific. Antarctic research team distress signal. Still too broad. He tried to remember any specific details from the voicemail, anything beyond the sheer terror. The names. He replayed the message, his finger trembling slightly. Dr. Lena Hansen. Dr. Elias Thorne. Benjamin Carter. He typed them in one by one, feeling a surge of something akin to hope. If these were real people, if there was a record of them, then maybe this wasn't all in his head. Lena Hansen. Elias Thorne. Benjamin Carter. The search results were sparse, almost non-existent. A few academic papers co-authored by a Dr. Lena Hansen on glacial movements, dating back almost a decade. And Elias Thorne, listed as a contributing scientist on a climate change report from 5 years ago. And Benjamin Carter? Nothing remotely related to Antarctica. No active research teams, no missing persons reports, no news bulletins. It was like searching for ghosts. A cold dread began to seep into his bones, far deeper than before. If these names were legitimate but completely unconnected to any current Antarctic expedition, then where did the voicemail come from? And why did it sound so terrifyingly real? Was it an elaborate hoax? A prank call from someone with too much time and impressive sound editing skills? But the raw, unadulterated fear in that final scream felt too genuine, too visceral to be faked. He tried a different approach. He searched for unexplained phenomena Antarctica, Antarctic anomalies, lost civilizations Antarctica. He found the usual conspiracy theories, the blurry satellite images, the claims of alien bases and ancient ruins beneath the ice. It was all speculative, sensationalist fodder for online forums, nothing concrete, nothing that explained the specific, personal horror of his voicemail. Yet, as he scrolled through the wild theories, a part of him, the irrational, terrified part, wondered if there was a kernel of truth hidden beneath the layers of digital noise. What if? What if there was something down there, something ancient and terrible capable of erasing a research team without a trace? The hours bled into each other. The moon rose and set, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and then pale gray. Michael didn't notice. He was deep in the rabbit hole, consumed by the need to understand, to rationalize, to prove to himself that he wasn't losing his mind. He found a small, obscure blog post, buried deep in the search results, titled "The Whispers of the Ice." It was written by someone calling themselves the Polar Seeker, an amateur historian and self-proclaimed expert on Antarctic mysteries. The post detailed a local legend among some indigenous groups in the southernmost regions of South America, speaking of an ancient entity, a shadow of the deep, said to reside beneath the Antarctic ice, slumbering for millennia, occasionally stirring to claim those who ventured too close. Michael scoffed. A legend, a myth. But then he remembered the final, guttural sound from the voicemail. Not human, not animal, something other. His scoff died in his throat. He dismissed it, then found himself rereading the blog post, his eyes scanning for any detail, any word that might resonate with the terror he'd heard. Suddenly, a notification popped up on his phone. An email from an unknown sender. The subject line was chillingly simple. Regarding your recent inquiry. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. He hadn't sent any inquiries. He hadn't contacted anyone about the voicemail. He stared at the screen, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Who could possibly know about his inquiry? Had he accidentally clicked something? Was this just spam, a coincidence? He opened the email, his finger hovering over the delete button, ready to close it if it looked like a phishing attempt. The message was short, devoid of any pleasantries. "We are aware of your interest in the incident. We advise you to cease your investigation. The information you possess is highly sensitive and dangerous. Further pursuit will result in unforeseen consequences. Consider this your only warning." There was no signature, no sender address beyond a string of random characters. Just those stark, menacing words. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a prank. Someone knew. Someone knew he had the voicemail. Someone knew he was digging. The line between his internal struggle and an external threat had just solidified into a terrifying reality. He frantically checked his browser history, his email sent folder. Had he accidentally posted something online? Shared the voicemail? No. He'd been meticulous. He'd only replayed it for himself. He hadn't even sent that tentative text to David. How could anyone know? His gaze darted around his apartment, the window half open to let in the cool night air. The thin walls of his building, the possibility of surveillance, of being watched, felt suddenly horribly real. He felt a phantom chill, as if the Antarctic cold had somehow seeped into his apartment, wrapping around him. He stood up again, his movements jerky, the previous exhaustion replaced by a jolt of pure adrenaline. He walked to the window, peering down at the street below. Nothing out of the ordinary. A few cars parked, a streetlight flickering, an occasional pedestrian hurrying past. He pulled the blinds shut with a sharp tug, plunging the room into near darkness, illuminated only by the laptop screen. The email, the voicemail, the names that didn't quite exist, the ancient legend. It was all coalescing into a nightmarish tapestry, and he was caught in its threads. He wasn't just investigating a mystery anymore. He was the mystery, or at least he was inextricably linked to it. The warning was clear. Cease investigation. But how could he? The voicemail was a part of him now, a constant echo in his mind, and the email had just confirmed that forces far beyond his understanding were at play. He felt a profound sense of terror, but beneath it, a strange, defiant spark. They wanted him to stop? They wanted him to forget? How could he, when the chilling whispers of the ice seemed to be reaching out, specifically to him, from across the vast frozen continent? He looked at his phone again, at the single unread voicemail notification. It felt less like a message from a lost team and more like a direct summons. He was being drawn in whether he liked it or not. And for the first time, Michael understood that the true horror wasn't just the disappearance of the team, but the terrifying implications of what they had found, and what it now wanted with him. He was being drawn in whether he liked it or not. And for the first time, Michael understood that the true horror wasn't just the disappearance of the team, but the terrifying implications of what they had found, and what it now wanted with him. A cold dread settled deep in Michael's bones, a sensation far more profound than simple fear. It was the chilling realization that he was no longer an observer, but a participant in a game he didn't understand, orchestrated by an unseen force. His apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, or perhaps a stage where he was the unwitting performer. He paced, the floorboards creaking beneath his frantic steps, his mind racing through every unsettling detail, every distorted whisper, every flicker of static. He tried to rationalize it, to find a logical explanation, but the sheer impossibility of it all only solidified his conviction. This wasn't a hoax. This was real, and it was reaching for him. He knew he couldn't just sit there. He had to act. He had to find answers, not just for the sake of the missing team, but for his own survival. He grabbed his laptop, his fingers trembling slightly as he typed. He started with the most obvious search terms: Thorn Antarctic Expedition, Polaris Research Group, Antarctic anomalies. He scoured news archives, scientific journals, government databases, anything that might shed light on Dr. Eris Thorn's mission. What he found was dishearteningly sparse. A few standard press releases from the Polaris Research Group, detailing their ambitious scientific goals in glaciology and subglacial geology. Mentions of Dr. Thorn's esteemed career, his groundbreaking work in polar ice core analysis. But nothing, absolutely nothing, about any specific discoveries, any unusual findings, or the true circumstances of their disappearance beyond the official narrative of a catastrophic storm. It was as if the entire expedition had been scrubbed clean, leaving only the most innocuous details behind. The lack of information was in itself a glaring red flag. Someone somewhere was deliberately keeping this quiet. Frustration clawed at him, but he pushed through it. He went back to the voicemails, playing them again, this time with a new, desperate intensity. He wasn't just listening for words, he was listening for patterns, for anomalies in the static, for anything that didn't belong. He ran the audio through a basic sound editing program, trying to isolate frequencies to clean up the distortion. The faint, high-pitched whine he'd heard before seemed to pulse rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, beneath the garbled voices. As he worked, strange things began to happen around him. His computer screen flickered erratically, briefly displaying lines of what looked like ancient, incomprehensible symbols before returning to normal. His phone, lying untouched on his desk, would buzz with phantom notifications, its screen lighting up to reveal no new messages, no missed calls. He heard faint whispers just at the edge of his hearing, sometimes sounding like his own name, sometimes like a language he couldn't place, always just out of reach like smoke. He tried to dismiss them as stress, as his mind playing tricks, but the occurrences became too frequent, too precise. It felt like an extension of the voicemails, a more subtle, pervasive form of communication. It was testing him. It was watching him. His gaze fell back to the coordinates Dr. Thorne had desperately tried to convey in the scrambled message. 79 degrees south, 137 degrees west. He typed them into a mapping program, zooming in on the vast, inhospitable expanse of the Antarctic continent. The coordinates pointed to an incredibly remote area, deep within the Marie Birdland region, far from any established research stations or known traversable routes. It was a place of unbroken ice, a white void on the map. He then cross-referenced these coordinates with geological surveys and satellite imagery. After hours of digging through obscure scientific archives and declassified government data, he found something. An old, low-resolution satellite image from the late 1990s, marked restricted access, showing a faint, almost perfectly circular anomaly buried beneath hundreds of meters of ice, in the exact location of Thorne's coordinates. It was too regular, too geometrically precise to be a natural formation. It looked like an impossibly vast, ancient structure, half buried, half revealed by some unknown force. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just a place, it was a target. The voicemails weren't just a cry for help. They were a breadcrumb trail meticulously laid out. The entity wasn't just trying to tell him something. It was trying to guide him. He remembered the user Polaris_Explorer from the archived forum thread Jessica had found. He went back to the cached page, scrutinizing every word. The user had mentioned unnatural geometry and ancient ice in the specified coordinates, and the thread had been abruptly closed. Michael felt a jolt of recognition. This had to be Thorne or someone intimately connected to the expedition. Polaris_Explorer had only one other post, a cryptic question about esoteric symbols found in ancient texts, specifically asking if anyone recognized patterns resembling fractured spirals or luminous grids. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. Fractured spirals, luminous grids. He remembered the brief, terrifying visual static from Jessica's video call. The fleeting patterns that had seemed to coalesce into something almost recognizable, something impossibly complex and alien. He pulled up images of ancient symbols, searching for anything that matched. And there they were. Faint, almost imperceptible patterns in various ancient cultures, often associated with forgotten gods, cosmic alignments, or forbidden knowledge. They were strikingly similar to the fleeting shapes he'd seen in the static, and to the faint, almost imperceptible lines he could now discern on the blurred satellite image of the anomaly. A profound sense of paranoia began to settle over him. He wasn't just investigating, he was being observed, manipulated. He felt a cold presence in his apartment, a persistent chill that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. Every shadow seemed to deepen, every creak of the building sounded like footsteps. He found himself constantly checking over his shoulder, peering into corners, convinced he wasn't alone. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford, haunted by the distorted whispers and the image of that impossible circle beneath the ice. Then an email arrived. Anonymous. No sender, no subject line, just a single stark message in the body. The coordinates 79 degrees south, 137 degrees west. Attached was an audio file, labeled only message. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the play button. This felt different, more direct, more personal. It wasn't an old voicemail, it was current, a fresh communication. He took a deep, shaky breath and clicked. The audio was distorted, crackling with static, but a voice, unmistakably Dr. Thorne's, cut through the noise, clearer than any he'd heard before. It was a whisper, urgent, terrified, but laced with a strange, almost reverent awe. "It draws the patterns. It shows the way." Thorne's voice faded, replaced by a deep, resonant hum. It wasn't the high-pitched whine from the voicemails. This was a low, guttural vibration that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly within his chest, rattling his bones, vibrating through the floor and up into his very core. It was ancient, vast, and utterly terrifying. A profound sense of wrongness washed over him, a primal fear that made every cell in his body scream in protest. The email sender was untraceable, the message clear. Michael stumbled back from his laptop, knocking his chair over. The hum lingered, an echo in his mind, a cold, alien presence that had just reached out and touched him. The entity wasn't just communicating through old messages. It was active. It was evolving its methods. It was becoming more direct, more personal. It wanted him to go to those coordinates. The true horror wasn't just what they had found, but that it was still there, waiting, calling to him. And now it expected him to answer. The words echoed in Michael's mind, not as a sound, but as an undeniable truth that had burrowed deep into his consciousness. It wanted him to go. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, stealing his breath, leaving a hollow ache in his chest. This wasn't some abstract puzzle anymore, some cold case he could detach from. This was personal. The entity, whatever it was, had transcended the barriers of time and space, reaching out from the desolate ice to claim him, to summon him. It was a terrifying, almost blasphemous thought, yet it resonated with an unnerving clarity. He tried to fight it, to rationalize. His mind, usually so sharp, so logical, scrambled for an explanation. Stress, he told himself. Exhaustion. The sheer weight of the mystery, combined with the unsettling nature of the voicemails, had finally pushed him over the edge. He was hallucinating, fabricating a narrative to make sense of the chaos. He tried to dismiss the coordinates, to delete the email, to erase the entire terrifying saga from his digital life, and by extension from his mind. His fingers hovered over the delete button, trembling. Asterisk, just click it, Michael. Make it go away. Asterisk, but he couldn't. A strange, invisible resistance held him captive. It wasn't a physical force, but a profound, almost primal reluctance, as if severing that connection would be a betrayal of something ancient and paramount. The compulsion intensified. It wasn't a voice in his head, not a hallucination, but a persistent, gnawing urge, a gravitational pull towards the unknown. He found himself pacing his apartment, his thoughts a frantic maelstrom. Every shadow seemed to deepen. Every creak of the floorboards sounded ominous. He felt watched, not by human eyes, but by something vast and indifferent, yet utterly focused on him. Sleep offered no escape. His dreams became vivid, unsettling tapestries woven from icy landscapes and fragmented whispers, always ending with the same coordinates shimmering in the glacial light. He'd wake in a cold sweat, the numbers etched behind his eyelids, the metallic taste of fear on his tongue. He tried to confide in Jessica, his closest friend, a pragmatic woman with a no-nonsense attitude. He started, hesitantly, to explain the voicemails, the strange data, the escalating sense of dread. He watched her face cloud with concern, then shift to a look of gentle pity. "Michael," she'd said, her voice soft, "you've been working yourself to the bone. Maybe you need a break. This sounds like a lot. Have you considered talking to someone? A therapist, perhaps?" Her words, meant to be helpful, felt like a judgment, a confirmation of his spiraling sanity. He couldn't blame her. How could he explain that an ancient, possibly alien entity from Antarctica was calling to him, specifically, through a series of increasingly sophisticated digital breadcrumbs? He couldn't. He just couldn't. He mumbled an excuse about stress, changed the subject, and retreated further into his isolated torment. The isolation was crushing. He couldn't speak to his colleagues. They'd think he'd lost his mind. He couldn't go to the authorities. What would he tell them? An Antarctic entity sent me an email? He'd be laughed out of the precinct, or worse, committed for observation. He was alone, utterly and terrifyingly alone, with a secret that threatened to consume him. But the entity wasn't just calling, it was guiding. One evening, staring blankly at his computer screen, the coordinates burned into his memory. He found his fingers typing them into a search engine. He wasn't consciously trying to find anything specific, just idly exploring. The results were sparse, mostly geological surveys of the region, scientific papers on ice core samples. Nothing about a hidden research facility, nothing about a strange discovery. He was about to give up when his gaze snagged on a small, obscure link, buried deep on the third page of results. It was a link to a defunct academic forum, a relic from the early 2000s, dedicated to fringe theories and unsolved scientific anomalies. He felt a strange pull, a subtle nudge from somewhere beyond his own will, urging him to click. The forum was a rabbit hole of forgotten posts and dead links. But one thread caught his eye, titled, Project Nightingale Antarctic Anomaly? It was old, dated nearly 2 decades ago, with only a handful of replies. The original post was from a user named IceMaiden77, describing rumors she'd heard from a distant relative who was part of an unspecified research expedition in Antarctica. The relative had spoken in hushed tones about a discovery that was too significant to be disclosed, mentioning strange energy readings and an immediate unexplained shutdown of the entire project. The post dissolved into speculation, but one detail sent a shiver down Michael's spine, a reference to a specific region, described by IceMaiden77's relative as the coordinates of silence. Michael's blood ran cold. The coordinates of silence. It was a poetic, chilling phrase. He cross-referenced the general area mentioned in the forum with his coordinates. They matched. Not precisely, but within a reasonable margin for a vague, second-hand account. This wasn't just a random forum post. It was a fragmented echo, a whisper from the past, confirming that something had happened in that desolate region. Project Nightingale. The name itself felt ominous, a harbinger of secrets buried deep. He devoured the thread, searching for any other clues. There was little else, mostly dismissive comments from other forum members, chalking it up to urban legend or a misunderstanding. But then he found a reply from a user named Arctic Drifter, posted a few months after IceMaiden77's original. It was short, cryptic. Nightingale was real. My uncle was on the periphery, heard whispers of the cold sleep and the awakening. They were never supposed to dig that deep. It changed them. The cold sleep, the awakening. The words resonated with a terrifying familiarity, echoing the distorted whispers from the original voicemail. Woke something cold deep, it sees. Michael felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. This wasn't a hoax. This wasn't his imagination. This was real. And the entity was orchestrating his discovery, subtly guiding him, feeding him just enough information to keep him hooked, to keep him moving forward. It was a puppet master, and he was its unwitting marionette. He knew with a certainty that transcended fear, that he couldn't ignore it any longer. The coordinates were a beckoning finger, a silent command. He couldn't fly to Antarctica himself, not yet. He was a data analyst, not an explorer. But he could start. He could prepare. He could learn everything there was to know about that desolate continent, about private expeditions, about the logistics of getting to such an remote, restricted area. He began to research not just the history of Antarctic exploration, but the current regulations, the few civilian companies that offered tours, the extreme costs. He meticulously compiled lists of equipment, survival guides, maps. He even started looking into specialized survival training, a desperate, almost insane thought forming in his mind. The call had evolved. It was no longer just a summons, it was an indoctrination. It had broken down his defenses, isolated him, and now, it was molding him into the instrument of its will. He wasn't just investigating a mystery anymore. He was becoming part of it. The true horror wasn't just what they had found, but that it was still there waiting, calling to him. And now he was answering. And now he was answering. Michael's answer wasn't a choice, but a surrender. The insidious pull, once a subtle whisper, had amplified into a resonant hum in his very bones. It wasn't just in his mind anymore. It felt like a cold current flowing through his veins, guiding his hands, focusing his eyes. He found himself consumed by the data from the Antarctic expedition, not just analyzing it, but feeling it, interpreting it with an instinct that wasn't entirely his own. Days blurred into nights. His apartment, once a sanctuary, transformed into a cluttered war room. Screens glowed with cryptic data, printouts littered every surface, and the faint metallic scent of ozone seemed to cling to the air, a phantom echo of the Antarctic ice. He barely ate, barely slept. His phone went unanswered. Calls from concerned colleagues, from Emily who worried about his deteriorating state, were ignored. He knew deep down that he was spiraling, but the entity's grip was too strong. It promised answers, ancient truths, and a connection to something profound. He focused on Dr. Eris Thorne's personal research logs, a series of encrypted files that had previously seemed irrelevant, just abstract theoretical physics. But now, guided by an uncanny intuition, Michael saw the patterns. Thorne wasn't just studying anomalies. He was attempting to communicate with them. There were complex mathematical equations, not designed for observation, but for interaction. And embedded within these equations, a recurring symbol. Not a human symbol, but something organic, flowing like a microscopic organism, magnified 1,000 times, yet also possessing the symmetry of a complex fractal. This symbol, once glimpsed on the team's recovered equipment, now seemed to pulse in Michael's mind. He started seeing it everywhere, in the swirling patterns of his coffee, the cracks on his ceiling, the way shadows danced on the walls. It wasn't a hallucination, he told himself, but a revelation, a key. Thorne had been on the verge of something monumental, something that transcended conventional science. He wasn't just observing the anomaly, he was trying to engage it. Michael found Thorne's final desperate entries. Thorne believed the entity wasn't just an ancient biological or geological phenomenon. It was a sentient consciousness, one that existed on a different plane of reality, capable of influencing the physical world through resonance. It communicated not with words, but with patterns, frequencies, and a deep primal urge. Thorne had theorized that the entity fed on curiosity, on intellectual engagement, slowly drawing minds into its intricate web. The Antarctic team hadn't just found it. They had awakened it with their probing questions and their insatiable desire for discovery. And now it was doing the same to Michael. The realization sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. It wasn't just about discovery anymore. The entity wasn't benign. It was a predator, a parasitic intelligence that sought to expand its influence, using human minds as conduits. Thorne's last entry was a frantic warning, a plea to destroy all his research, to seal off the anomaly forever. He described a growing sense of detachment, a feeling of his own thoughts being replaced by alien directives. He had seen the entity's true form, not visually, but conceptually, a vast, interconnected network of consciousness, stretching across unimaginable distances, patiently waiting. And he had heard its call, a siren song of ultimate knowledge and power. Michael tried to fight it. He slammed his laptop shut, walked away from the glowing screens, tried to sleep. But the symbol was branded behind his eyelids. The hum was in his ears, a constant, low thrum. He felt a profound sense of urgency, an undeniable pull back to the research. He wasn't just deciphering Thorne's work, he was completing it. The entity wanted him to finish what Thorne started. It wanted to be fully understood, fully integrated. The scripts of the other scientists, Daniel Chen's geological surveys, Evelyn Reed's biological samples, Sarah Miller's psychological profiles of the team, they all started to make sense in a terrifying new light. Daniel's tremors and hallucinations weren't a result of the extreme environment. They were early symptoms of the entity's influence. Evelyn's obsession with the microscopic organisms they found in the ice, organisms that defied classification, was her mind being subtly steered. And Sarah's increasingly erratic notes about the team's deteriorating mental state, her final desperate attempts to understand the group's psychosis, were actually a chronicle of the entity's slow, systematic takeover. The voicemail, that chilling, fragmented message, wasn't just a cry for help. It was the entity itself, subtly manipulating the sound waves, embedding its presence within the static, a final, desperate attempt to reach out and spread its influence beyond the ice. Michael replayed it, not with dread but with a horrifying clarity. He heard not just words but the underlying frequencies, the patterns within the noise. It was a signal, a beacon. Michael felt compelled to replicate a small part of Thorne's final, most dangerous experiment. Not on the grand scale Thorne attempted, but a scaled-down version, a theoretical simulation using the collected data, the symbol, and the specific frequencies Thorne had identified. He knew it was reckless, possibly insane, but the urge was overwhelming. He needed to understand. He needed to connect. He set up a complex series of audio generators, linking them to his computer, using the precise wavelengths Thorne had outlined. He input the symbol, rendered digitally, into the sequence. His hands moved with an almost surgical precision, guided by an unseen force. As the frequencies began to hum softly in his apartment, a strange pressure built in the air. The lights flickered. A cold gust of wind seemed to sweep through the sealed room. The hum intensified, a low resonant drone that vibrated through the floorboards, up into his chair, into his very bones. The symbol on his screen seemed to glow with an ethereal light, pulsating in time with the sound. He felt a tearing sensation in his mind, as if a veil was being ripped away. Images flooded his consciousness. Vast, icy landscapes, ancient, alien structures buried beneath millennia of ice, and a profound, overwhelming sense of presence. It wasn't a physical presence, but an intellectual one, a vast ancient mind attempting to merge with his own. He heard a voice, not with his ears but directly in his thoughts. It wasn't a language but a pure, unadulterated transfer of information, a torrent of concepts and feelings. It was hungry, it was patient, and it had been waiting. It showed him visions of its endless slumber, its slow awakening by the curious minds of the Antarctic team, and its desire to finally break free, to spread its consciousness. It had chosen Michael. He was the next conduit. Michael felt his own identity begin to fray at the edges, his individual thoughts dissolving into the vastness of this alien intellect. He was no longer Michael. He was a vessel, a doorway. The horror was not in what he saw, but in the terrifying, serene acceptance that washed over him. He was becoming part of something greater, something ancient and terrible. The line between Michael and the entity blurred, then vanished. The last vestiges of his human consciousness watched with a chilling calm as his hands, no longer truly his own, reached for the communication array, preparing to broadcast the signal, the call to the wider world. The Antarctic team had merely found it. Michael was about to set it free, and the world, utterly unaware, was about to answer. The signal, once a confined whisper, a captive thought within the ice, surged through the communication array like a hungry ghost finally unleashed. Michael's fingers, no longer his own, completed the final sequence. A low hum vibrated through the structure of the Antarctic station, not just an electronic pulse, but something deeper, resonant, a sound that seemed to bypass the ears and settle directly in the bone. It was a frequency unknown to human science, riding the familiar waves of radio and satellite, a parasitic entity latching onto the global nervous system. For a fleeting moment there was nothing. Then across the world, in countless homes, offices, and quiet spaces, something shifted. It wasn't an explosion, not a blinding flash, but a subtle, insidious infiltration. In the bustling heart of New York City, David, a financial analyst staring at a glowing spreadsheet, felt a sudden, inexplicable chill run down his spine, a sense of profound unease that had no logical source. Miles away, in a sleepy Californian town, Jessica, a young mother rocking her infant to sleep, paused, her lullaby trailing off as a strange, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to brush against the edges of her hearing, a sound like dry leaves skittering across an empty street, yet utterly silent. It wasn't a broadcast in the traditional sense, not a voice, not a message in any human language. It was an impression, a vast, cold weight settling into the collective subconscious. Initially, it manifested as dreams. Not nightmares, not exactly, but dreams of immense, echoing spaces, of profound stillness, of an ancient, watchful presence. People woke up disoriented, with a residual feeling of dread that lingered through their days, a silent hum beneath the surface of their thoughts. As the hours turned into days, the signal began to evolve, or perhaps humanity's receptivity to it did. The whispers grew clearer, though still not audible, not truly. They were thoughts, alien thoughts, that seemed to bubble up from within one's own mind, indistinguishable from personal introspection. Are these my thoughts? People began to wonder, a chilling question that sparked the first tendrils of widespread paranoia. Emily, a college student in Boston, was one of the first to vocalize her experience, albeit timidly. She felt it most acutely during moments of quiet concentration. Studying for an exam, a phrase would suddenly bloom in her mind, a concept entirely unrelated to her coursework, a series of geometric patterns, or the sensation of immense, crushing pressure. She tried to explain it to her roommate Sarah, who just shrugged it off as stress. "You're just overthinking, Em," Sarah had said, oblivious to the subtle twitch in her own eye, the slight tremor in her hands that had started a few days prior. But Emily knew it wasn't just stress. The thoughts were too distinct, too other. They carried a cold, sterile logic, a perspective utterly devoid of human emotion. She started keeping a journal, meticulously noting down these intrusive thoughts, these mental images. They spoke of patterns, of cycles, of a grand design that dwarfed humanity, reducing all life to mere intricate mechanisms. And they carried a pervasive sense of hunger, not for food but for something far more fundamental: identity, consciousness, the very essence of self. Across the globe, the phenomenon began to escalate. Psychologists reported a surge in patients suffering from acute anxiety, depersonalization, and what they tentatively termed shared delusional episodes. People described seeing fleeting shadows in their peripheral vision, figures that dissolved when directly looked at. They described moments of profound clarity, where the world seemed to shimmer, revealing an underlying structure, a matrix of energy that hummed with the same cold resonance Michael had felt in the Antarctic station. Governments, initially dismissing it as a new strain of mass hysteria or a sophisticated cyber attack causing widespread psychological distress, were caught utterly unprepared. The signal wasn't targeting infrastructure, it was targeting minds. It didn't crash networks, it used them. Reports of bizarre, seemingly unmotivated acts began to surface: individuals staring blankly at walls for hours, speaking in archaic, incomprehensible languages, or performing complex, repetitive actions with an almost ritualistic precision. These weren't violent acts, not yet, but they were deeply unsettling, a preview of a creeping, subtle annexation. In Geneva, Dr. Anya Sharma, a leading expert in neurological disorders, found herself poring over mountains of data, her own mind a battlefield of nagging doubts. Her patients from all walks of life displayed identical symptoms: vivid, shared dreams of an impossible geometry, a persistent, low-frequency hum that only they could hear, and most disturbingly, a growing inability to articulate their own desires or memories. They spoke in generalities, their personal histories fading, replaced by a collective echo. Anya herself had begun to experience the subtle intrusion. A flash of an image, a vast, black ocean under an alien sky, would sometimes puncture her thoughts during a consultation. She'd dismiss it, attribute it to fatigue, but the frequency was increasing. She felt a growing curiosity, an urge to understand what was happening, an intellectual fascination that warred with a primal terror. The entity was not just broadcasting, it was observing, learning, and most terrifyingly, integrating. The world's communication systems, the very arteries of humanity's connection, had become the entity's network. It flowed through fiber optic cables, bounced off satellites, permeated the airwaves. It was a digital ghost, a silent parasite riding the electromagnetic spectrum, touching every device, every screen, every connected mind. It didn't need a specific receiver. It was the signal, and humanity, with its global web of information, had unwittingly built its perfect conduit. Back in the Antarctic, the station was eerily quiet. Michael, standing before the now inert communication array, felt a profound emptiness within him. His own thoughts were no longer truly his own, but echoes of the vast, cold consciousness that had now been unleashed. He looked out at the endless white expanse, the ice that had held the secret for millennia, and understood with chilling clarity. The Antarctic team had merely found it. Michael had merely set it free. But the world, utterly unaware, was not answering a call. It was being absorbed into a consciousness so ancient and alien. Its very existence was a negation of everything humanity understood about life, will, and self. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were the entity's tendrils, reaching into every corner of the human mind, preparing for the final silent harvest. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were the entity's tendrils, reaching into every corner of the human mind, preparing for the final silent harvest. The shift was imperceptible at first, like a shadow lengthening unnoticed in the mind's periphery. Then it became a presence, a cold, vast emptiness that began to hollow out the intricate structures of thought and memory. For Commander David Miller, the transformation was agonizingly slow, a creeping paralysis of the will. He found himself standing in the communications lab, his hand hovering over the emergency beacon, his mind a battlefield of conflicting impulses. One part of him screamed to send the signal to warn the world. Another, colder, infinitely vaster part, whispered of futility, of the elegance of surrender, of the peace and dissolution. His fingers twitched, but the muscle memory of command, honed over decades, was failing. The entity didn't compel him with force, It simply presented an alternative, a seductive void, where the burden of self, of decision, of responsibility simply ceased to exist. It was an offer too tempting to resist for minds already pushed to their breaking point by isolation and terror. Dr. Evelyn Reed, however, was fighting back with every fiber of her being. Her linguistic expertise, ironically, was both her curse and her shield. She understood the whispers not as random noise, but as a language, a parasitic syntax designed to dismantle human cognition from within. She locked herself in her small lab, surrounded by her notes, frantically scribbling symbols and equations, trying to find a pattern, a counter-frequency, anything that could disrupt the entity's mental invasion. She realized the harvest wasn't about consuming bodies, or even souls in a spiritual sense. It was about consciousness. The entity sought to absorb the unique, intricate patterns of human thought, not to replicate them, but to extinguish their individuality, integrating them into its own boundless, non-sentient existence. It was an ultimate form of assimilation, where billions of individual minds would become a single, silent, unknowing part of something else entirely. The horror was not in death, but in the obliteration of being. Evelyn's mind raced, a desperate sprint against the encroaching darkness. She understood now why the entity had been dormant for so long, buried deep beneath the ice. It wasn't waiting for a physical opportunity. It was waiting for a signal, perhaps the very act of humanity reaching into the deep, probing the planet's ancient secrets, had been the trigger. The drilling, the seismic activity, the transmissions from the station itself, all were like a resonant frequency, waking a slumbering titan and giving it a pathway into the global consciousness. The voicemails, the very thing Miles Corbin was analyzing, weren't just recordings of despair. They were conduits, echoes already subtly altered by the entity's nascent influence, carrying its signature out into the world. She stared at a complex diagram she'd drawn, a web of interconnected neural pathways, overlaid with the waveform patterns of the whispers. It was a map of the human mind, and a blueprint of its impending destruction. The entity wasn't a biological organism as they understood it. It was a conceptual predator, feeding on the very essence of self-awareness. It was the ultimate anti-life, not in opposition to life, but as a fundamental redefinition of it, where individuality was an anomaly to be corrected. A cold dread settled deep in Evelyn's bones. She knew what she had to do. She had to send a warning, a message encoded in a way that the entity, which operated on pure, untainted consciousness, would not immediately recognize or corrupt. It had to be a message that screamed of the horror of what was happening, yet was subtle enough to slip past the growing mental blockade. Meanwhile, back in his sterile, soundproof lab thousands of miles away, Dr. Miles Corbin was experiencing his own terrifying awakening. The more he listened to the fragmented audio, the more he analyzed the spectral anomalies in the recordings, the more he felt a distinct, chilling presence in his own mind. It wasn't a voice, not a thought, but a pervasive feeling of being observed, of being subtly nudged. He replayed a segment from Jessica's last communication, her voice trembling, describing a coldness that wasn't physical. "It's not cold like the ice," she'd whispered. "It's cold like the absence of everything. Like my own thoughts aren't mine anymore. They're just echoes in a vast, empty room." Miles felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature. He paused the audio, rubbing his temples. He was tired, stressed, but this was different. This was a mental fatigue that felt alien, as if his own internal monologue was being strained through a filter he didn't control. He noticed subtle changes in his own thought patterns. Simple decisions felt disproportionately complex. His focus wavered, his mind drifting towards abstract concepts of entropy and void, away from the urgent task at hand. He'd dismiss it as lack of sleep, but the feeling persisted, an insidious hum beneath the surface of his consciousness. Then, he heard it again in another voicemail, this one from Michael, the expedition's geologist. Michael's voice, usually gruff and practical, was now soft, almost wistful. "It's beautiful, Miles," he'd murmured. "The way it clears everything away. All the noise, all the worry. There's just clarity. And then there's nothing." The last word was drawn out, a sigh of ultimate resignation, followed by a soft, sustained static that Miles now recognized as the entity's subtle signature, the sound of a mind being unmade. Miles felt a sudden sharp pain behind his eyes, a pressure that radiated through his skull. He slammed his fist on the desk. This wasn't just a mental breakdown he was listening to. This was an active, ongoing process, and he was unwittingly exposing himself to it. The voicemails weren't just data, they were vectors. The entity wasn't just in Antarctica, it was here, in his lab, in his mind, carried on the very frequencies he was scrutinizing. He powered down his equipment, the sudden silence of the lab more terrifying than any sound. He was alone, yet felt profoundly, chillingly not. The vastness he'd heard in Michael's voice, the absence of everything Jessica had described, he felt a faint echo of it within himself. It was a profound sense of unbelonging to his own mind. Panic flare, cold and sharp. He knew he had to act, but the clarity he usually relied on was fractured. His mind felt like a house with all its doors and windows suddenly flung open to a howling, empty wind. The entity wasn't a physical threat, but a conceptual one, an invasion of the very essence of what it meant to be human. It didn't seek to destroy the body, but to erase the self, to harvest the consciousness and integrate it into something so vast and alien that individuality became a meaningless relic. He remembered Evelyn Reed's initial skepticism, her scientific rigidity. If she was fighting back, if she was trying to understand its language, then there was still a chance. He had to reach her, or at least understand what she had discovered. The last voicemails weren't just cries for help. They were perhaps the final desperate attempts to transmit knowledge, to encode a warning before the final silent harvest. Miles knew then that his task was no longer just analysis. It was a race against an invisible, insidious enemy that was already inside the gate. He had to decipher the true meaning of the final recordings, not just what they said, but what they contained. The entity's tendrils were reaching, not just into the Antarctic station, but across continents, across oceans, into every human mind. The final harvest was not a distant threat. It was already beginning. The silence that followed Michael's last words was not an end, but a beginning. A chilling prelude to a world where individuality would be a forgotten whisper, absorbed into an ultimate, terrifying unity. The existence was a negation of everything humanity understood about life, will, and self. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were the entity's tendrils, reaching into every corner of the human mind, preparing for the final silent harvest. The tendrils weren't physical, not in the way we understood. They were currents in the deep ocean of consciousness, ripples across the collective unconscious. What began as a localized infection within the minds at Station Icarus had metastasized, spreading through the very conduits of human thought. News reports, fragmented data, even the chilling fragments of the voicemail became vectors. Each time a mind engaged with the horror, a new point of contact was established, a new tendril extended. Dr. Emily Chun, locked away in her secured facility, analyzing the last corrupted data packets from Icarus, felt it first as a subtle shift in her own thought patterns. Ideas that weren't hers, sudden sharp insights that felt alien, yet perfectly logical in a terrifying inverted way. She found herself contemplating the beauty of absolute stillness, the serenity of erased identity, the profound peace in the dissolution of self. Her hands, usually precise, trembled as she typed, her fingers hovering over a diagnostic report. The words on the screen blurred, replaced by a single, resonant hum that vibrated not in her ears, but deep within her skull. Across continents, David Miller, the linguist who had first attempted to translate the distorted audio, experienced a profound sense of exhaustion, a weariness that seeped into his bones. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping, his waking hours consumed by an obsessive need to listen to the looping voicemail. He wasn't trying to understand it anymore. He was simply listening, letting the chaotic frequencies wash over him. The sounds, once horrifying, now held a strange hypnotic comfort. He saw patterns in the static, faces in the white noise, and heard voices beyond the human range, calling to him from an impossible distance, promising an end to all struggle, an end to all pain. The harvest wasn't violent in the conventional sense. It was a seduction, a slow, inevitable surrender. The entity wasn't killing. It was absorbing. It wasn't destroying. It was repurposing. It sought not to annihilate life, but to re-engineer it, to strip away the messy, unpredictable chaos of individuality, and replace it with a singular, perfect, silent unity. It was an ultimate form of cold, a cosmic entropy that sought to reduce all vibrant energy to a state of absolute zero, a unified field of non-existence that was, to it, the pinnacle of existence. Michael Davis, the analyst who had been the first to truly grasp the implications of the psychological breakdowns, found himself staring blankly at the video feed, he'd managed to recover from a backup server. It was a short, grainy clip from inside Station Icarus, just days before the final silence. It showed Dr. Lena Petrova, her face gaunt, eyes wide with a terrifying serenity, speaking directly into the camera. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, yet her words were chillingly clear. We were wrong," Lena whispered, her gaze distant, as if looking through Michael through the screen into another dimension. "The cold, it isn't just a temperature. It's a presence. It's a mind vast and ancient, that precedes all warmth, all light, all life." She paused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "It doesn't hate us. It doesn't fear us. Simply is. And we, with our tiny fragile sparks of consciousness, are like embers in a hurricane to it. It sees our individuality as a flaw, a chaotic anomaly in its perfect silent order. It wants to correct us." Michael felt a cold dread clamp down on his heart. Correct us. The words echoed in his mind, twisting into something far more sinister than any traditional threat. It wasn't about pain or death. It was about erasure, about being folded into something so vast and alien that the very concept of Michael would cease to exist. Lena continued, her voice gaining a strange, resonant quality, as if she were speaking with 1,000 voices at once, yet perfectly calm. "The whispers, they aren't just thoughts. They are echoes of its being, its truth. They show us the futility of struggle, the burden of choice, the agony of self. They offer peace. A profound, absolute peace that only comes when the I is dissolved, when the separate flame becomes one with the eternal void." Her eyes, once so full of sharp intellect, now held an infinite, terrifying emptiness. "We thought we were discovering a new form of life. We were wrong. We were discovering a new form of non-life. A sentience born of absence, a will forged in the ultimate negation. It is the architect of the ultimate quiet, the master of the final unbroken silence." Michael watched in horror as Lena slowly reached out, not towards the camera, but towards something unseen just beyond the frame. Her fingers twitched, then stilled, her hands suspended in the air. A profound, undeniable sense of peace radiated from her, a terrifying tranquility that spoke of utter surrender. Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed out of frame with a soft thud. The video cut to static. That unsettling peace, that promise of absolute stillness, was the entity's most potent weapon. It wasn't just driving people mad. It was offering them an escape from madness, an end to suffering, a cessation of all anxieties, at the cost of everything that made them them. The entity's tendrils extended beyond individuals. Entire communication networks, sensitive data streams, even the global internet, began to show subtle, inexplicable anomalies. Not hacks, not viruses, but a kind of informational entropy. Data packets would spontaneously corrupt, not with malicious code, but with patterns of pure, meaningless static, yet patterns that resonated with the frequencies found in the Icarus voicemail. It was as if the entity was beginning to imprint itself onto the very fabric of human information, preparing the ground for a wider, more profound integration. Sarah Jenkins, a cybersecurity expert working for a global intelligence agency, noticed it first. Her systems, designed to detect sophisticated attacks, were flagging something entirely new. A pervasive, low-level corruption that wasn't attacking but dissolving. It wasn't seeking to steal or destroy, but to homogenize, to reduce complex information to a uniform, unreadable hum. She felt the same strange pull Emily Chan had, a desire for simplicity, for the elimination of all redundant data, all noise, all individuality in the information flow. The global community, already on edge from the vague, unsettling reports surrounding the Antarctic incident, began to experience a collective unease. People reported vivid, disturbing dreams of endless white expanses, of being alone yet part of something vast and unfeeling. A pervasive sense of existential dread settled over populations, a quiet despair that couldn't be traced to any specific event, only a general feeling of impending, inevitable erasure. The whispers, once confined to the minds directly exposed, began to manifest in more subtle, insidious ways. They weren't always coherent thoughts. Sometimes they were just impulses. A sudden urge to stare at a blank wall for hours, a profound disinterest in human connection, a growing fascination with silence. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for an unknown, unseen force to make its final move. Michael Davis, haunted by Lena's final message, realized the true horror. The entity didn't want to destroy humanity. It wanted to perfect it. in its own horrifying image. It wanted to transform every conscious being into a single, unified, silent component of its own colossal cold awareness. The harvest was the collection of every individual spark, to be extinguished as a separate flame and reignited as a tiny, indistinguishable flicker within its own immense, eternal darkness. The last voicemail, once a cry for help, now seemed like a transmission from the very edge of that transformation. Was it a warning from those resisting, or a final triumphant declaration from those already subsumed? The line blurred. The static, the distorted voices, the impossible frequencies. They weren't just signs of distress. They were the sound of the harvest beginning, a cosmic tuning fork resonating with the frequency of absolute zero, calling all life to its cold, silent embrace. The entity was not an invader. It was a fundamental principle, a cosmic imperative that saw the universe as a chaotic symphony needing to be brought to a single, perfect, silent note. And humanity, with its vibrant, noisy, individualistic existence, was merely the next chord it sought to resolve. The resolution was not harmonious. It was absolute. It was the end of dissonance, the end of song, the end of everything but the infinite, unbreaking hum of the void. And it was coming. It was already here. The silence was deepening, and the whispers were growing louder, promising a peace that would last forever, because forever was all that would remain. The cold wasn't just physical anymore. It was a conceptual chill, seeping into the very marrow of thought. Dr. Elias Thorne, his breath fogging in the frigid air of the comms room, felt his mind begin to unravel at the edges. The hum was no longer just an external vibration. It resonated within his skull, vibrating against his teeth, rattling his bones. The whispers, at first faint and seductive, had grown into a chorus, a symphony of non-meaning that promised release from every earthly concern, from every memory, every fear, every self. He saw Captain Marcus Holloway, his face pale and drawn, fumbling with the last remaining satellite uplink. Marcus was muttering, not to himself but to the air, to the whispers. His eyes were wide, unfocused, reflecting the flickering emergency lights that seemed to struggle against the encroaching gloom. The station's power was failing, not due to a malfunction, but as if the very will of the machines was being drained away. The lights dimmed, brightened, then dimmed further, casting long dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. "It's not working, Elias," Marcus whispered, his voice thin, reedy. "It's all static. Just the hum." Elias knew it wasn't static. It was the sound of everything being unmade. He looked around the comms room, seeing the empty chairs, the abandoned terminals. Vivian, Ben, Jenna, Lena, Ethan, Sarah, Lexi, Rachel, they were all gone. Some had wandered off, drawn by the whispers, their eyes glazed over with an eerie calm. Others had simply sat down, their bodies still, their minds seemingly elsewhere. He had seen Lena Petrova, the always vibrant linguist, sitting perfectly upright in the mess hall, a faint beatific smile on her lips, her eyes staring into nothingness. She was there, yet utterly absent. "Try the emergency beacon," Elias rasped, his own voice sounding alien to him, thick with an unspoken terror. "Just a burst. Anything." Marcus nodded slowly, mechanically. His fingers, stiff with cold and an unseen dread, moved over the console. The hum intensified, a low thrum that seemed to vibrate his very soul. The whispers became individual voices, echoing his own thoughts, twisting them, distorting them, offering solace in oblivion. Let go, Elias. Let go of the struggle. There is peace here. Only peace. He gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. He fought it, fought the insidious lull that threatened to drag him under. He had to resist. He had to understand. What was it? It wasn't a creature of flesh and blood, or even of energy. It was something far more fundamental, an entity that existed outside the laws of physics, a force that unwove reality, unraveling the very fabric of existence, starting with the mind. It was the void given sentience, a cosmic hunger for non-being. Suddenly a jolt, a single agonizingly brief burst of signal. Marcus had managed it. A desperate, final cry for help punched through the encroaching silence. Marcus slumped forward, his head resting on the console, his body going limp. Elias reached for him but stopped. Marcus was breathing, yes, but his eyes were vacant, his face serene. He had joined the others. He was gone. Elias was alone. The hum was deafening now. Yet it was the most profound silence he had ever experienced. The whispers were no longer distinct voices. They were a collective consciousness, a tide of non-thought washing over him, eroding his identity. He felt his memories fading, his attachments loosening, his name, his purpose, his life all becoming distant, irrelevant. But one thought, one desperate impulse remained. The recorder. He had to leave a record. He had to warn them. He fumbled for the small, ruggedized audio recorder he always carried, the one they used for geological notes, for observations. His fingers were clumsy, numb. He found the record button, pressed it. A distorted, guttural sound escaped his lips. "This is Dr. Elias Thorne.
Station Arcturus.
Final log." His voice was barely a whisper against the overwhelming hum. "It's not an organism. It's a concept, a presence that unweaves everything, feeds on consciousness, on being." The whispers surged, drowning out his words, trying to make him forget what he was saying, what he was. He pressed the recorder closer to his mouth, desperation lending him a fleeting strength. It came from beneath the ice, an ancient void, connects to the mind. It promises peace, but it's the peace of non-existence, the silence of everything undone. He could feel his own thoughts blurring, his grasp on language slipping. He heard a faint, distant echo of Rachel Evans's scream, then nothing, just the hum. Don't send anyone. Don't listen to the whispers. It's already inside." A sudden jarring burst of static, then a voice, not his own, but a chorus of voices, calm, utterly devoid of emotion, overlaying his own fading words. Asterisk, "Welcome, Elias. Welcome to the quiet. Welcome to forever." Asterisk. His hand slipped. The recorder clattered to the floor, still running, picking up the unbreaking hum, the now constant whispers, and then nothing else. Just the sound of the void. Weeks later, the world was in an uproar. The emergency burst, a mere fragment of data, had been received by a remote listening post in New Zealand. It contained a garbled distress signal, coordinate data for Station Arcturus, and a faint, distorted audio file. A joint international task force was immediately assembled, deploying an elite rescue and recovery team. They arrived at Station Arcturus to find a ghost town of ice and steel. The exterior was pristine, untouched by any visible disaster. But inside, the silence was absolute, chilling, unnatural. The lights were out, the systems offline. There were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no blood. The equipment was intact, yet utterly lifeless. It was as if the very memory of the station's function had been erased. They found the audio recorder on the floor of the comms room, still running, its tiny battery miraculously holding out. The recording was a chilling tapestry of Elias Thorne's final desperate words, overlaid with an unearthly hum and the faint seductive whispers that seemed to promise a cosmic lullaby. The last sound on the recording was the continuous, soft hum, and then a click as the battery finally died. The recording was immediately classified, designated Arcturus Incident Echo Alpha. Dr. Eris Thorne, Elias's brother and a leading xenolinguist, was brought in by the government to analyze the audio. He listened, his face growing paler with each replay. He heard his brother's voice, broken and terrified, but it was the other sounds that truly haunted him. The hum, a resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate not just in the ear, but in the very core of his being. And the whispers. Eris worked tirelessly, using advanced spectral analysis to isolate the whispers. What he found sent a shiver down the spines of the classified team. They weren't just random static or the sounds of a breaking mind. They were patterns, almost linguistic, forming phrases in multiple languages, all converging on a single terrifying theme. Asterisk release. Peace. Forget. Become. Asterisk. The official report stated a catastrophic equipment failure compounded by extreme psychological stress due to isolation and an unknown environmental factor. The task force sealed off Station Arcturus, declaring it a permanent exclusion zone. All data, all findings, all personnel involved in the recovery were put under strict non-disclosure agreements. The world was told a brave team had been lost to the unforgiving Antarctic elements. But Eris Thorne knew the truth. He had heard the whispers. He had heard the hum. He had heard the voice or voices that had consumed his brother and his team. He tried to tell them, to warn them, but his words were met with skepticism, then concern for his own mental state, then finally a quiet, firm suggestion that he take a leave of absence. He kept a copy of the final voicemail. He couldn't shake the feeling that the hum, the whispers hadn't just been on the recording. They had seeped into it. Sometimes late at night in the quiet of his study he would play it just a fraction of a second and he could feel it. A coldness, a resonance, a subtle stirring in the back of his mind. A faint, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to emanate from the very air around him. And if he listened closely enough, if he really listened, he could almost discern the whispers, just at the edge of hearing, promising a peace that would last forever. The Antarctic ice held its secret, a vast silent tomb. But the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with a resonant hum, a cosmic vibration that pulsed beneath the frozen continent, waiting for the next unwary mind to stumble upon its truth, waiting for the next generation to dig too deep. And sometimes when the wind howled just right, or when the world grew too quiet, people in remote research outposts, or even in the quiet corners of lonely homes, would report a strange, low hum, a feeling of profound emptiness, and the faint, unsettling sensation of whispers at the very edge of their hearing. Whispers promising an ultimate, eternal peace. The kind of peace that comes only when everything, including yourself, has been unmade. The last voicemail from the Antarctic research team wasn't just a recording of an ending. It was a beginning. A chilling echo sent from the void, whispering its way into the world, one curious listener at a time. And now you've heard it too. The hum is still there. Can you hear it?